Lilah Thorne never imagined that purchasing the old Ashford Estate would change her life forever. When she found the architect's original blueprints rolled up in a dusty corner of the attic, she thought they were just historical curiosities. But as she unrolled the yellowed paper across her kitchen table, her breath caught in her throat. There, hidden between the library and the servants' quarters, was a room that didn't exist. A room with no door, no windows, and no apparent way inside. The blueprints showed it clearly, marked with strange symbols she didn't recognize, and scrawled in faded ink along the bottom were words that made her blood run cold. Never open. Never speak of this. The Ashford Estate had stood empty for nearly 40 years when Lilah bought it in the spring of 2019. The sprawling Victorian mansion sat on 12 acres outside Portland, Maine, its Gothic architecture both beautiful and intimidating. Built in 1912 by a wealthy industrialist named Colter Ashford, the house had passed through several owners before being abandoned in the late 1970s. Local real estate agent Kaia Morrison had been reluctant to show Lilah the property, mentioning vague stories about the house's troubled past. But Lilah, an architect herself, had fallen in love with the building's unique design the moment she saw the photographs online. Moving into the estate took 3 months. Lilah hired a small crew to help with basic repairs and cleaning. Among them was Joel Brennan, a carpenter with 30 years of experience restoring historic homes. Joel brought his nephew Abel along to help with the heavy lifting. The two men had worked on dozens of old houses throughout New England, but even they admitted the Ashford Estate felt different. Abel told Lilah that the house seemed to watch them as they worked. Joel laughed it off, but Lilah noticed he never went upstairs alone. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late August when Lilah discovered the blueprints. She had been exploring the attic, taking measurements for a potential renovation. The space was cramped and hot, filled with old furniture covered in white sheets. In the far corner, behind a broken wardrobe, she found a leather tube containing several rolled documents. Most were routine architectural drawings, but one set stood out. The paper was thicker, the ink darker, and the level of detail far exceeded the other plans. Lilah spread the main blueprint across her table and weighted down the corners with coffee mugs. She traced the familiar outline of the house with her finger. The grand entrance hall, the sweeping staircase, the formal dining room. Everything matched the existing structure perfectly. But then she saw it. Between the library on the east wing and what had been the servants' quarters, there was a rectangular space marked with cross-hatching. The room measured approximately 15 feet by 20 feet. According to the blueprint, it should be located on the ground floor, accessible from the main hallway. But Lilah had walked that hallway 100 times. There was no door. The wall was solid, covered in the same oak paneling that ran throughout the house. She measured the distance from the library door to the servants' quarters entrance. 38 feet. Then she checked the interior dimensions of both rooms. The math didn't add up. There was a gap, a space that existed in the walls but couldn't be seen or entered. Kaia arrived the next morning with coffee and bagels. Lilah had called her the night before, unable to sleep after her discovery. The real estate agent studied the blueprints while Lilah paced nervously around the kitchen. Kaia's expression grew more serious as she examined the hidden room. She pointed to the strange symbols surrounding the space. They looked almost like mathematical equations, but the notation was unfamiliar. And then there was the warning written at the bottom of the page. Kaia sat back in her chair and took a long sip of coffee. She told Lilah about the rumors she had heard growing up, stories about the Ashford family and the terrible tragedy that had befallen them. In the fall of 1913, just 1 year after the house was completed, Colter Ashford's wife, Brianna, and their 3 children died suddenly. The official cause was listed as carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty furnace. But people whispered about other possibilities. Some said Brianna had gone mad. Others claimed Colter had discovered something in the house that drove him to desperate measures. Whatever the truth, Colter sold the estate immediately after the funerals and left Maine. He was never heard from again. Lilah felt a chill despite the warm summer air. She asked Kaia if she thought the hidden room had something to do with the deaths. Kaia shrugged, but her eyes betrayed her concern. She suggested they bring in an expert to examine the blueprints and investigate the wall. Lilah agreed. She needed answers. Patrick O'Connor was a structural engineer who specialized in historic buildings. Kaia had worked with him on several projects and trusted his expertise. Patrick arrived at the estate 2 days later, accompanied by his assistant, Rafael Torres. The two men brought ground-penetrating radar equipment and thermal imaging cameras. If there was a hidden space behind the wall, they would find it. Patrick set up his equipment in the hallway between the library and the servants' quarters. Raphael calibrated the radar while Patrick examined the blueprints. He whistled softly as he studied the symbols around the hidden room. Patrick told Lilah that the notation was old, predating modern architectural standards, but he recognized some of the markings. They appeared to be instructions for soundproofing and air isolation. Whatever the room was designed for, Colter Ashford had wanted it completely sealed off from the rest of the house. The radar scan confirmed what Lilah already suspected. There was indeed a hollow space behind the wall, matching the dimensions shown on the blueprint. The thermal imaging revealed that the temperature inside the hidden room was significantly lower than the surrounding areas. Patrick suggested this could indicate the space was sealed so tightly that outside air wasn't circulating. But he also noted something strange. The radar showed what appeared to be objects inside the room. Large objects, arranged in a pattern he couldn't quite make out. Joel and Abel returned to the estate the following Monday. Lilah had decided to open the wall and discover what lay behind it. Joel was hesitant at first, reminding her about the warning on the blueprints. But Lilah was determined. She had to know the truth. The carpenter agreed to help, but insisted they proceed carefully. Old houses sometimes contained hazards like asbestos or lead paint, and if the room had been sealed for over a century, the air inside might be toxic. They started in the library, where Patrick's scans indicated the wall was thinnest. Joel used a reciprocating saw to carefully cut through the oak paneling. The wood was thick and hard, clearly built to last. Behind the paneling was a layer of brick, and behind that, another layer of steel plating. Joel had never seen anything like it. This wasn't just a sealed room, it was a vault. The work took 3 days. Joel and Abel had to bring in specialized tools to cut through the steel. Patrick monitored the process, checking for structural issues. As they cut deeper, a strange smell began to seep through the gaps. It wasn't unpleasant exactly, but it was unusual. Chemical and sweet, like old medicine mixed with flowers. Raphael suggested they wear respirators, just to be safe. On Thursday afternoon, Joel made the final cut. A section of the wall, roughly 3 feet square, fell inward with a heavy thud. Cold air rushed out, carrying with it that strange, sweet smell. Lilah approached the opening with a flashlight, her heart pounding. She aimed the beam into the darkness. The hidden room was filled with photographs. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, covering every inch of the walls. But these weren't family portraits or landscapes. They were photographs of the same person, taken over and over again from different angles, at different times of day, in different parts of the house. A young woman with dark hair and pale skin. Lilah recognized her from the portraits hanging in the main hall. Brianna Bailey Ashford, Colter's wife. But it was what stood in the center of the room that made Lilah stumble backward. A chair, heavy and wooden, bolted to the floor, and attached to the chair were leather straps positioned at the arms, legs, and chest. Next to the chair was a small table covered with glass bottles and metal instruments. Medical instruments. The bottles still contained traces of liquid, their labels faded but partially readable. Chloroform, laudanum, morphine. Kaia called the police. Within an hour, the estate was swarming with officers and investigators. Detective Bailey Colter, no relation to the original owner despite the shared surname, took charge of the scene. She documented everything, photographing the room from every angle. The Historical Society was contacted, as were forensic experts from the state crime lab. Whatever had happened in this room over a century ago, it needed to be properly investigated and recorded. Dr. Rafael Mendoza, a forensic anthropologist from the University of Maine, arrived the next day. He examined the chair and the instruments carefully, noting their condition and placement. The leather straps showed signs of use, with worn grooves where something or someone had pulled against them repeatedly. The bottles contained residue that could be tested, though Dr. Mendoza warned that the results might be inconclusive after so much time. But what interested him most were marks on the floor beneath the chair. Scratches, deep and deliberate, as if made by fingernails dragging across wood. The investigation lasted 2 weeks. During that time, Detective Colter uncovered records that had been sealed for decades. Hospital admissions from 1912 showing that Brianna Ashford had been treated for what doctors then called hysteria and melancholia. Letters from Colter to his business partners, discussing his wife's deteriorating mental state and his desperate search for a cure. And most damning of all, receipts for medical equipment and chemicals, purchased in quantities far exceeding what would be needed for simple household care. Joel found a journal hidden behind loose floorboards in Colter's study. The leather binding was cracked and stained, but the pages inside were still legible. Colter had documented everything. His belief that Brianna's condition was caused by exposure to the outside world. His theory that isolation and controlled medical treatment could cure her. His decision to build a special room where he could administer treatments without interference. The journal entries grew more frantic and incoherent as months passed. Colter had convinced himself he was helping his wife, even as his methods grew more extreme. The final entry, dated October 1913, was written in a shaking hand. Colter described how Brianna had stopped responding to his treatments, how she had become silent and still, staring at nothing, how he had increased the dosages, desperate to see some improvement, and then the children. They had tried to help their mother. They had tried to open the hidden room. Colter wrote that he couldn't let them interfere. He couldn't let them ruin everything he had worked for. The entry ended abruptly, the last sentence trailing off into illegible scrawls. Dr. Mendoza presented his findings to Lilah and the investigators in late September. Based on the evidence in the hidden room and Colter's journal, he believed Brianna had been held captive and subjected to unregulated medical experimentation by her own husband. The treatments Colter administered, combining powerful sedatives and outdated psychiatric techniques, would have been devastating to her physical and mental health. The official cause of death, carbon monoxide poisoning, was likely a cover story. Dr. Mendoza suspected Brianna had died from the cumulative effects of prolonged drug exposure and psychological trauma. As for the children, their deaths remained more mysterious. The journal suggested Colter had taken action to prevent them from helping their mother, but it wasn't clear exactly what had happened. Detective Colter theorized that Colter had used the same drugs on his children that he had used on Brianna, possibly administering fatal doses either accidentally or intentionally. Without bodies to examine, the truth would never be fully known. The Ashford family had been buried in a private cemetery that no longer existed, their remains lost to time. Patrick helped Lilah seal the hidden room again. But before they closed it up, she insisted on removing all the photographs of Brianna. It felt wrong to leave them there, trapped in that terrible space. The photographs were donated to the Historical Society, along with Colter's journal and the blueprints. Let them be a warning, Lilah thought. Let people know what had happened here. The story made national news. Journalists descended on the small Maine town, eager to report on the dark secret hidden in the walls of the Ashford Estate. True crime podcasts devoted entire episodes to the case. Historians debated the ethical standards of early 20th century medicine and the treatment of women diagnosed with mental illness. Brianna's story became a symbol of a darker time when husbands had absolute authority over their wives and medical knowledge was primitive and dangerous. Lilah considered selling the estate. The thought of living in a house where such horrors had occurred was almost unbearable. But Kaia convinced her to stay, at least for a while. The house wasn't evil, Kaia argued. It was just old, and old places sometimes held old sorrows. What mattered now was how Lilah chose to honor that history. She could let the darkness win by running away, or she could transform the space into something meaningful. After much thought, Lilah decided to establish a foundation. The Brianna Bailey Ashford Memorial Fund would support research into mental health treatment and advocate for patients' rights. Part of the estate would be converted into a small museum, documenting not just what happened to the Ashford family, but the broader history of psychiatric treatment in America. Visitors would learn about the progress that had been made and the work that still needed to be done. Joel and Abel helped with the renovations, carefully preserving the historic elements of the house while making it accessible to the public. The hidden room was left sealed, but a plaque was installed in the hallway explaining its existence and significance. Patrick designed a memorial garden on the grounds with a bench where people could sit and reflect. Raphael helped catalog the artifacts and documents for the museum displays. The Ashford Estate Museum opened to the public in the spring of 2021. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of people came to see the house and learn Brianna's story. Mental health professionals praised the foundation for its educational work. Survivors of abuse found comfort in knowing that Brianna's suffering had not been forgotten. And slowly, the house began to feel different. The oppressive weight that had hung over it lifted. Light seemed to fill the rooms more fully. Even Abel admitted he no longer felt like the house was watching him. Lilah still lives at the estate. She gives tours twice a week, sharing Brianna's story with visitors from around the world. Sometimes people ask her if she regrets opening the hidden room. The answer is always no. Yes, what she discovered was horrifying. Yes, learning the truth about the Ashford family changed her forever. But secrets have power, and that power grows in darkness. By bringing the truth into the light, by refusing to let Brianna's suffering be erased or forgotten, Lilah had taken that power away. History often hides dark secrets in its shadows. Old houses hold memories in their walls, and sometimes the only way to heal from the past is to confront it directly, no matter how painful that confrontation might be. The blueprints that Lilah found in that dusty attic revealed more than just a hidden room. They revealed a woman who had been trapped, silenced, and erased. But now, Brianna Bailey Ashford's story would be told. Her life would be remembered, and perhaps, in some small way, justice would finally be served. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What other historical mysteries do you think deserve to be uncovered? What secrets might still be hiding in the walls of old houses, waiting to be discovered? History is full of untold stories. Together, we can make sure they're finally heard.